Well, you've reached session 3, and today we'll open a bunch of new doors by learning the C major scale, which we'll use as a foundation for understanding many of the concepts we'll want to master. Some of these concepts that will relate to that scale are fingering and traveling up and down the keyboard between hand positions, intervals from note to note and within a chord, ear training to hear the notes of the scale and the intervals between the notes, and as an added bonus, we'll put a little more movement in our first chord progression. So let's get started with the C major scale, and I'll play us into it with a little theme I put together using the C major scale. Major scales are the foundational building blocks for much of the music that you hear. And major scales can be built off of any of the notes on the piano. The most simple one to play and understand is the C major scale. The C major scale contains 7 pitches going up in steps from any C on the keyboard to the C above or below it. Let's start on middle C, and going up all the white keys, we'll go to the C above it, and then back down. Now we'll go to the C below it, and back up. The notes of this scale are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And out of this major scale come the notes for many of the melodies we'll learn at the piano and many of the tunes we already have in our ears. Let's check out the steps between the notes in the C major scale. This scale, like any major scale, is made up of a series of whole and half steps. A whole step is defined as the distance between 2 adjacent white notes with a black note in between. For example, from C to D, and you see the black note in between, or from D to E with this black note in between. A half step is the distance between a white note and a black note, say from middle C to the black note above, or between 2 white notes with no black note in between. And 2 examples are from E going to F, that's a half step, no black note in between, and from B to C. That's a half step with no black note in between. So the major scale is built on a specific pattern of whole and half steps. And this pattern is this. Going up the major scale from C, we have first 2 whole steps to D and E, then a half step to F, then 3 whole steps to G, A, and B, and a half step to C. And all major scales have the same construction in half steps and whole steps. You can play a major scale from any note on the keyboard using this series of whole and half steps. And that brings us to our first nugget this session. And that's this. You can play a major scale from any note by using this combination of steps. 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step. If you play a major scale from any note other than C, you'll be playing at least 1 black key. Here's a few examples of other major scales, and don't worry about learning these scales right now. I just want you to see and hear a few major scales from notes other than C. From D, we get, this is a D major scale. Same whole step, half step relationships as the C major scale, but now we have 2 black notes. Here's a major scale from F. Now here's a major scale from B, and it's going to have all 5 of the black notes in it. Same whole step half relationship as C. To play all 8 notes of the C major scale from C to C in an unbroken line, we'll need to use more than one hand position. So we'll need to learn which fingers to use and how to connect to the new hand position. The C major scale contains 2 hand positions at the piano. This one, which is C, D, and E, and this one, which is F, G, A, and B. Each one of these shapes helps us to see and feel the contour of the entire scale by seeing and feeling these 2 shapes. The first shape I'm fingering 1, 2, and 3, and the next shape I'm fingering 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we go to the 5th finger to complete the scale. So here's an important principle of fingering at the piano. There's often more than one option for fingering melodies, chords, or whatever we're going to play at the piano. And a good option is any one that allows you to play the piano so that it sounds the way you want, feels the way you want, and allows your body to stay relaxed. A bad fingering option is one that won't make it sound right, doesn't feel good, or can't be played in a relaxed way with some practice. To illustrate this basic fingering principle on the C major scale, let's go back to that 5-finger exercise for a minute. The first 5 notes of the C major scale are the same 5 notes from our 5-finger exercise. So let's try to play the scale with the fingering from that 5-finger exercise. We play C through G with fingers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we need to get up to A and keep going up to C, but we've run out of fingers. And it's hard to cross any finger under that 5th finger and play that A easily after having that 5th finger on G. We want to make it sound like this, an unbroken line. We want it to feel good with a maximum efficiency of motion, and we want our hand after we play it to be relaxed and ready to play the next thing to keep the flow going. So here's a fingering that allows us to do that. 1, 2, 3 on C, D, E, the notes of that first shape. Then when we get to F, we're going to easily cross the thumb under the 3rd finger while slightly shifting the wrist to the right. Now our hand is in a new position on that 2nd shape, allowing us to play F, G, A, B, and C with fingers 1 through 5. So let's look at the 2 hand positions and shapes we connected by crossing the thumb under. The first has these 3 notes, and the next has these 4 notes. And we connect them by crossing the thumb under that 3rd finger to get us in the next position. Going back down the C major scale, we'll have the same notes and the same shapes, these 2. And we use the same fingering, only in reverse. On C, B, A, G, F, we use fingers 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And when we get to our change of hand position from F to E, the 3rd finger will cross over the thumb this time as the hand and the entire arm moves slightly and easily down the keyboard to finish the scale. So once again, that descending C major scale is fingered like this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, crossing that 3rd finger over the thumb, and then 3, 2, 1. So this session's next nugget is this. Moving to new hand positions involves the thumb crossing under the fingers when going up, which is also called ascending, or it involves the fingers crossing over the thumb when going down, also called descending. This enables us to travel up and down the keyboard when traveling large distances like this. We'll use muscles farther up the arm to move and gauge the distance to our destination. Learning the physical part of piano playing is much like learning choreography for the fingers, wrists, and entire body. With time and relaxed, methodical practice, you'll learn how to integrate your body into playing the piano. It's a kind of dance. When you're playing efficiently and relaxed and with good fingering, you're more able to make melodies sing, play rhythms that are in the groove, and learn to play things that are at first very challenging. The point of showing you this fingering for the C major scale right now is not so much that you can rip up and down scales. So let's read these notes of the C major scale while we slowly play them up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now start at the top of the scale and read the scale going down and then back up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that we know how to finger this scale, let's look at some of the musical relationships between the notes in a major scale. The distance from one note to another is called an interval. Let's look at the intervals from C to the other notes from the C major scale. We're naming these intervals based on their distance from C, the beginning note of the scale. The distance from C to the first note of the scale, D, is called a second. The distance from C to E is a third. The distance from C to F is a fourth. From C to G is a fifth. The distance from C to A is a sixth. And from C to B is called the interval of a seventh. Chords such as the C major chord we learned also have intervals. The notes of a chord, like those in the C major scale, are numbered by their distance from the root of the chord. So when we make a C triad, which is C, E, and G, our root is C. The E would be called the third of the chord, just as it is the third of a C major scale, and G would be the fifth of the chord, just as it is the fifth of the major scale. To play piano in a connected way, I believe that you have to hear what you're playing in the same way a singer has to hear a pitch before they sing it. Now we'll start learning how to hear the pitches of the C major scale up and down. And we'll start with down. To help us hear the descending C major scale, we use a tried and true Christmas carol written by the famous classical composer G.F. Handel, Joy to the World. Starting on the C above middle C, it goes like this. What makes this tune different than simply playing a C major scale going down is the rhythm of the melody. We'll use the same fingering for the descending major scale that we just learned. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 3, 2, 1. First, we'll play the scale slowly. Now we'll play the melody to Joy to the World slowly while we sing along with the melody on the vowel ah. I'll count us in and let's play that phrase and sing it together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah. And don't forget, when you're playing that scale going down, you have the crossover, crossing the third finger over the thumb. At times during these sessions, I'll ask you to sing or to sing along while you play to help develop your ability to hear what you're playing. When we did our 5-finger exercise, this shape became these individual notes. And we approached the C major scale the same way. These two shapes outlined the scale, and then we played the individual notes contained in those shapes. We'll use the same process with Joy to the World. Together, these two shapes make up the first phrase of Joy to the World. If you add one more shape, then you've completed the first part of the melody of the song. So these two shapes make this melody. And then this third shape outlines the rest of that part of the melody. The principle of seeing and, more importantly, feeling shapes at the piano and connecting them to the melodies and chords you'll be playing will be a huge help in learning how to play. When we get ready to play this piece of the tune, we'll count ourselves in order to have the pulse set in our bodies and in order to begin on the money. Let's practice counting ourselves in and landing on that first note. We'll count ourselves in like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we land on that C with the fifth finger to start the first phrase. Which brings us to this session's last nugget, which is this. Always count yourself in when you practice so that you feel the pulse of what you're playing definitively and so that you begin playing authoritatively. So after we practice counting in and hitting that first note, then we'll drop our hand, shake it out a little bit, and set our minds to letting go of any tension that might be in our hand and arm. We're just practicing landing that all-important first note, and we're taking our time in establishing how to begin this phrase, having already established a pulse in our mind. And we're stopping after we practice this thing we're working on to keep ourselves relaxed. So let's take a breath and slowly bring our hand into position, count ourselves in, and begin Joy to the World. 1, 2, 3, 4. After we're done with this piece of the tune, we drop our hand and feel it relaxing before we practice it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the way we want to practice everything: chords, scales, pieces, melodies, rhythmic stuff, whatever we're working on. We're keeping ourselves focused and relaxed by cleaning the slate and letting go of tension which our body generally produces when faced with an unfamiliar muscle movement, whether we consciously feel tense or not. When you're practicing this piece of Joy to the World, pay special attention to the 2 points where your hand changes position. First, from this F to E, where the third finger crosses over the thumb. Then 3 notes later, when the second finger has to get up to this G to get into that third position. So when you're down on this C trying to get up to that G, get off this middle C and let your wrist and forearm take you into that third position. Rather than being down here and reaching for that G with the second finger. Let your larger muscles do the work to get you there. I use the melody of Joy to the World to represent the descending C major scale because most of us know what the melody sounds like. And we're trying to establish a connection between the melodies that we hear and how to play them on the piano. Now let's take a look at how Joy to the World looks written out in music. I'll play it as the music goes by. Here's the part we didn't play last time. We checked out how the descending major scale sounds when we sing it and through the melody to Joy to the World. Now let's check out the ascending major scale. We'll use the syllable ah, and we'll sing along with it as we play it, like this. Ah. So slowly sing the scale as we play each pitch. You may notice that there are certain intervals in the scale that are harder to hear than others, and those are the ones that you want to isolate by playing the scale slowly and singing along. So the whole C major scale, once again, singing along with it, goes like this, and we'll slow it down a little bit. When we get to the workshop, we'll learn to play the rest of Joy to the World by ear, phrase by phrase, using the notes of the C major scale. This helps teach us to hear the distances, which are intervals, between the notes in our ear and the notes on the keyboard. Now, to finish out the session, let me show you one more thing. Let's go back to our first chord progression from the first session and break up the chords a bit to give them more movement. Before, when we played this progression, we had started with this right-hand chord and this bass note. And we played the chords with this rhythm. Now let's play the top two notes of the first chord, middle C and E, with fingers 3 and 5, and let's alternate them with the bottom note played by the thumb so that they go back and forth once per beat like this. Let's do the same with the second and third chords. For the second chord, the top two notes stay the same, alternating with the A underneath them, played by the thumb for 2 beats. And then the third chord's top two notes are C and D, played by fingers 3 and 4, alternating with the A played by the thumb for 2 beats. So let's put together all 3 of our chords with the new alternating movement, just the right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember to play those back and forth alternating notes as evenly as possible and in time with the pulse we're counting. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So drop your right hand now and take a breath, and then we'll add the left hand. Once again, playing this progression twice and resolving it back to the first chord. Remember, our left hand notes were C here with the thumb and F here with the pinky or 5th finger. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're working on the notes and fingerings of this progression, and also on playing in time and staying relaxed. If this tempo is too quick to play in time with and relax into, slow it down. In the sessions to come, we'll be using the metronome to help us gauge how fast to practice things and to help us keep a steady pulse. So we covered a lot of ground this session. We learned our first scale, the C major scale, and it'll be a window to understanding concepts of melody, chords, intervals, and fingering at the piano. We also put a little more movement into our first chord progression with a new rhythm. In the workshop, we'll read the chords to a whole tune, figure out part of a tune by ear, and we'll get our fingers moving in some new ways. So I'll see you in the workshop.